Hello there. This is November the 25th, 2022, and I have a question from Rockwell, Texas, and this is about elections and voting. This is an interesting question. Is there any value or benefit and or an obligation on a Christian's part to participate in political elections by voting? All right, now let me first address the idea of a Christian's part, and then I'll talk about the overall subject of elections and voting, that sort of thing. From what I can tell, there is nothing in the scriptures about elections or voting, from what I can tell. I don't see that as being in the scriptures. When God defined the nation of Israel through the Mosaic Law, there were no elections, there was no voting, there was no king in the definition that God established through the Mosaic Law of how the people would function and how they would relate to one another. Those are things that happened later. All right, the idea of a king being set up. So, I cannot refer to anything in the scriptures to say that this is something that God has an opinion about. Okay, because when he defined the nation of Israel, he defined it in a way that there would be no voting of any kind. And it worked, the system worked just fine. So we can't say that just because you're a Christian that there's some kind of unique obligation or element of participation just because. So whether a person is a Christian or a non-Christian, I don't think that this should be something that we think about. All right, because whether you are a Christian or a non-Christian, you're going to live in a society of some kind, and there will be some kind of structure of some kind. And if you're in a democratic kind of a structure, then you'll be invited to vote. And of course, if anybody wants to vote, they can go ahead and do that. I won't say that it's good or bad either way, and I'm not going to encourage someone to do it or not to do it. All right. What I can do is I can tell you some things that I think you might want to keep in mind when you have an opportunity to participate in some kind of an election. There are some things you might want to keep in mind. Now, every civilization, every community needs to have some kind of governmental structure. Okay. But this has to do with what does the government need to do? What are the problems that the government needs to solve? All right, the first thing that we should keep in mind is that we do need a government in order to apply some sense of force to others when necessary. Okay, and what that means, of course, depends on the community. I'm going to say that if a person is causing harm to someone else, and this harm needs to be better defined. Okay, if I hurt your feelings, that definitely is not a legitimate reason to try to destroy my life and my existence, all right, or to steal from me or from others. That of course is pure evil. To think in those terms. But if there's an injury of some kind, we could go to the Mosaic Law and see that there were laws related to when action needed to be taken against someone else, and these actions were related to people causing harm to somebody else, stealing from somebody else. In which case the government existed in order to apply force to the person or persons who were causing harm to somebody else. Okay, so there is a government for that. That is a purpose, and we need those kinds of things to take place because there are people in the world who cause harm to other people. All right, now there are other reasons why people want a government to exist. But just because there are other reasons doesn't necessarily mean that those are good reasons. Okay? And so there has to be an agreement, there has to be an understanding of what are these people who we are voting for, What are these people going to do? What do they have the authority to do? What are their responsibilities, and what is the authority that they need in order to fulfill these responsibilities? All right, now when a person, anybody, goes and votes for someone, when they do that, are they asking that question? Are they asking the question, what are the responsibilities that this person will have? Okay, what do they need to do? Do they have the ability to fulfill these responsibilities? And are they going to fulfill these responsibilities well? What are the decisions that this person needs to make? And are they going to make good decisions when it comes to these decisions? Is anybody asking that question? In general, people are not asking that question. They are voting for other reasons. Okay, it's very unusual to find anybody who even knows what the responsibility. Are you going to vote for a president? Well, what are his responsibilities? Do you know? What are the decisions that he has to make? Does anybody know? Well, then how can you really vote for someone to take that office if you don't even know what the office requires, or what's involved with having that position? And so I think it's important for people to consider these things, and you'll discover that most people just don't care. Why? Because there are other things that they care about. All right, and it's these other things that tend to be a problem. Where do these other things come from? Well, in order for the government to perform the services that I just described, such as dealing with the issues related to crime, people causing harm to somebody else, they need to have the power of force to forcibly move someone from one place to another, imprison them, force the taking of their property. There has to be the application or the ability to apply force. All right, now this is where things start getting a little ugly. Because when you have a group of people, whether they are elected or not, okay, whether they're representatives of a population who have been elected, or whether they are a king and his representatives, or whether it's an oligarchy of some kind, whatever the structure is, or a dictator, whoever these people are, there are going to be people who have the power and the authority to exercise force, and no one's going to stop them. All right? If there is no one who will stop these people from exercising force against somebody else, then they have absolute rule. All right? Now, what happens is, and it usually doesn't take long, what happens is that people will use this power of force inappropriately. And the first way that this usually shows up is it shows up in what they call taxation. Okay? And taxation is either direct or it is indirect. Direct taxation is when these people, they say, you, other people, you give us your money, or else we will apply force upon you, which can take many forms. All right? But that's taxation. There's another word for that. It's called theft, in my opinion. All right? It's stealing money. And you might think, well, gosh, how can the government fulfill its responsibilities without taking money from somebody else to pay people to fulfill these responsibilities? Well, that's another question, and I am not prepared to answer that kind of a question right now, and I'm saying that because I don't think I'm going to take the time to try and prepare to answer that kind of a question right now, because even if I did, I don't think it would really matter, and I have other things that I could do with my time, so I'm not going to bother with that. On what the alternatives can be. If you look at the history of the United States, the Constitution, the federal government raised its money through tariffs. That's how they did it. That was the decision that was made, And there's been a lot of discussion about that, how that worked, whether it did work or didn't work. In the Mosaic Law, there was the tithe, and so there can be a place, all right, for taxation. However, it is recognized as being as something that is theft when force will be applied for a failure to comply with the taxes, all right? Then it becomes a mechanism of theft. That's direct theft. Indirect theft happens through a central bank. When there is a central bank, then there is the ability to create money, all right? And when there is the ability to create money, then there is another form of theft called counterfeiting, all right? But you see, when a central bank does it, then they don't call it counterfeiting. They call it monetary policy, or something else like that. All right, you put a different name on it. But really, it ends up being a system of theft, but it is indirect theft, okay? It's indirect because you see it in the mechanism called inflation, all right? So when you see inflation in the common sense of an increase in prices, if we use that definition of inflation, there are other definitions, but if we use that definition of rising prices, the way to understand that is that means that your wealth has been stolen from you, okay? Your earning power has been stolen from you. It is an indirect form of theft that is only possible through the central bank mechanism. I should not say that it is only possible. There are other ways that can make that possible. But that's the overall view concerning theft by a government, all right, through taxation, either direct or indirect. So that's a reasonable summary. All right. Now, when you have a group of people that we call the government, but it's really just a group of people who have the ability to steal from other people because they can use force to take from other people, and there's no one who's going to stop them from taking from other people. When you have that kind of a mechanism in place, well, then there's going to be corruption, all right? I mean, there's going to be a lot of corruption that is going to surround that kind of a system. And how long will it take is just a matter of time. Eventually, this is what you're going to look for. You're going to look for whatever time period you are in, whatever time you are in this cycle of change that happens within governments and within countries and institutions and stuff. You need to keep an eye out for what stage you are in this transition. But eventually what happens is that the amount of theft that is taking place is a large percentage of what these people do. All right? Maybe they do 5% of protecting people from harm. They use their force for 5% of their use of force has to do with protecting people from being harmed by others, maybe 5%. And 95% of what these people do is connected to taking money from other people, taking wealth from other people. What do they do with it? Well, they give it to somebody else. They spend it or they just give it away, all right? And if you've got a large percentage of their activity being connected to theft, then you could say you're probably in trouble. Your society is getting close to being doomed. All right. Another way that you might look at this is you might evaluate the current state of your economy. How much of your economy is connected to government spending? If it's like over 50% of your economy is related to government spending, well, then 50% of the money that's being spent in your economy is stolen money. That's a lot of theft going on in your world. It's a lot of theft. And I would suggest that if that percentage of your economy is high, then you're doomed. It's just a matter of when. How long will it take before people decide to stop producing things that can be taken? And that's what happens. Eventually, the society stops producing things that can be taken. People just figure it out. They say, well, if I get stuff, if I produce stuff, if I make stuff, it's just going to be stolen from me in one form or another. And so I'm just not going to do that much. I'll just make stuff that I use. Maybe a little extra, but not too much more. And that's when these systems eventually collapse. And they all do. They always do. All right? So what you are going to do when you vote for someone to be in a position of authority, all right, you're going to vote for them to enter into this system of theft. Okay, so what are they going to do when they get there? Are they going to increase the theft? Are they going to decrease the theft? Or maybe they'll just hit the big red button and just close it all down and say, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to go back to the limited functions that a government really needs to do for its people, and that's it. Instead of taking from one group of people, taking from some people and giving it to other people, minus a commission, of course, that they keep for themselves. That's a difficult transition to make. So when people are voting for a candidate nowadays, that's what it tends to look like. All right, which one do you want to vote for? Are you going to vote for the person who will steal a lot, or are you going to vote for the person who will steal not so much? Who are you going to vote for? So who do people vote for? Well, people vote for the person who will either take the least away from them or give the most to them. That's who people vote for. Who cares what the responsibilities are? They will vote for whoever will take the least from them and or whoever will give them the most, minus the commission, of course, that they keep for themselves. All right? And that's what it becomes. So your entire society becomes a society of people who only think about trying to keep what they can that they produce, keep it from being stolen, or the other people are trying to steal more from somebody else who has it. And when your society starts looking like that, in a big way, chances are you're doomed. Okay. So who do you vote for? Do you vote for a person who's going to take least, or take more, or give you more from somebody else? These are the decisions that people end up making. All right? And, I personally feel uncomfortable with voting for anybody who's going to take a position in some kind of official capacity so that they can steal from somebody else. All right? And that's what they do. And they go into that position, and the position, it has all, they're going to go into a governmental position, and when they get there, they're going to be a part of this huge apparatus, this huge system that's been going on for a long time. And what are they going to do when they get there? Are they just going to say, no more stealing? Or they're going to say, well, I'll compromise and we'll do a little bit of stealing over here and a little bit of stealing over there. Because if we don't, if we stop all the stealing, well, then what is our society going to look like? If you have an economy, for example, that 60% of it is government funded, 60% of the economy is all about a check that comes from a government agency. If you decide that you're going to stop the theft all at once, then that means that 60% of the economy immediately just goes away. It just goes away. Are they going to do that? Of course they're not going to do that, because if they do that, well, then the people are going to vote somebody else into office who's going to restart the theft again. There's just no way. There's just no way to get this system to work. The only way for this to be solved is it has to collapse. There is no other way, because if you contract it a little bit, even, you'll discover that there'll be so many problems and so much conflict and so many issues, and they'll be systemic, that the entire system will just collapse anyway. So in general, nobody wants to be responsible for that, especially when the majority of the people are just looking to steal something from somebody else using the government as their apparatus by their voting. There just isn't anything you can do with that. All right. So for that reason, I personally, just don't participate. I don't participate is because first of all, I don't want to say I'm in favor of somebody who's going to participate in theft. But there's another aspect to this, and that is when I vote for somebody who isn't going to participate in the theft, because there's normally some candidates who are available for that, even though their percentages are pretty low when it comes to the vote. I still won't even vote for them, because if I do, well, then I'm participating in the system. And I have a lot of conversations with lots of thieves, okay? Or there's another word, looter, lots of looters. There's lots of people who are part of the system, and I have conversations with them about this. And if I'm not too careful, they will confront me, and they'll say, well, did you vote? Did you vote? Did you participate in the voting system? Now if I say no, I didn't vote, well, then they say, well, then you have nothing to say. You have nothing to complain about. We can take everything from you that you have. All right? Let me say that again. We can take everything that you have from you because you didn't vote, and you should not even complain. All right? Well, what if I did vote and I voted for somebody who wouldn't take everything from me? They said, well, you lost. You lost. Your candidate lost. And so we have your endorsement, because you are a part of the system, you voted. And so you legitimized our right to take everything you have if we want. You legitimized it because you voted. You participated. You're just the loser. Right? So that's what it becomes. And at what point does it become that? I don't know. If it was 95% of the government's activity was legitimate activity to protect people from things like theft, and only 5% theft was going on, well, maybe you got a system that's kind of working, and maybe it's worth participating to some extent. I don't know. I really don't know. But that's what I would say. Keep in mind, if you're going to participate in the voting system, keep in mind the degree of theft that is a part of your system. And that if you vote and you win, you're a part of the theft mechanism. You've just got your guy who's in there doing the stealing. And if you lose, well, you endorsed the system and you're just the loser. And the winners now can feel legitimized because you were a part of it, You were a part of it, so they feel legitimized in being able to take whatever they want, or whatever they can get away with. Okay? Now, let me add one more thing that can be helpful for discussion and for other things, and that is to understand that every governmental system is going to collapse. It's just the way it goes. Every system will collapse, and it will collapse due to corruption in general. All right, very few systems have collapsed due to just being conquered by another system. In general, they collapse from within, and then at a certain point they are overtaken, of course. But there is a collapse that happens from its own corruption, from the weight of its own corruption. And the corruption you'll find the corruption in 4 different categories. You'll find it in the idea of extortion. You'll find it in blackmail, bribes, and payoffs. Okay, those are the 4 things. Extortion, blackmail, bribes, and payoffs. Extortion is, you're going to do what I tell you to do, or I'm going to find a way to hurt you. Blackmail is, I found out you did something wrong, and so you're going to do whatever I tell you to do, or I'm going to hurt you by telling other people that you did something wrong. That's blackmail. Similar to extortion. But with extortion, you don't have to do anything wrong. All right? And then there's bribes and there's payoffs. And in every governmental system where you've got people who have the power of force, okay, or the power of being able to decide how money gets distributed, then you're always going to get this corruption that finds its way in. And it's a good idea to keep an eye out. It's a good idea to examine your society and the stage of corruption your society is in, and have a look and try to get a feel for how much extortion, blackmail, bribery, and payoffs, how much of that is a part of your government. All right? And when you see that the percentage of your government having to, the percentage of that going on in your government system is relatively high, then you should just know that whatever you have going on right now is doomed. Okay? And I'm going to leave it with that, okay? That's my view on the subject of voting. And, whether you vote or not, you go right ahead. But I would suggest you just maybe try to keep these things in mind as a part of what it is that you participate in. I do hope this helps. If you have any other questions for me, do send them to me directly by email at aaron@aaronbudgeon.net. Thanks.